Good evening, everyone. We're so excited you are here. Just a few quick words before we begin. We know that there are some, in addition to the humans joining us, there are some gnats who have joined us as well, and some of them are congregating around specific areas and tables. If you're uncomfortable, really do feel free to move around and about. I believe I saw bug spray also being kind of moved as well. We want you to be as comfortable as possible. And as you can tell, this is not a fixed formal setting. It's intended to be one that is lovely and spacious. So do feel free to take advantage of that. And just one other quick request before we get started, if you could please silence your cell phones. That would mean so much. You have on your tables, in the chairs you won't find these, but if you go to the tables you will, and you can bring them back to the chairs if you'd like, a copy of our songs, our poetry, our program for this evening. As we enter officially now into the season of return, we'll join together singing Hashivenu, return us, O God, and we shall surely return, renew our days as in days of old.
Hashivenu, Hashivenu,
For those of you who have come to Selichot over the years here at North Shore Congregation Israel, you are likely used to not being outside, but rather inside our sanctuary, usually up close on the bima, all together in reflection as we open the door to the season of return. And as you might imagine, that up-close idea in physical reality is not something that we are able to do right now. But nevertheless, Selichot invites us to get up close in many different ways. And so we decided we would really try to take advantage of a different type of closeness, a different type of opening, a different type of transformation that we might invite ourselves into together. Through an experience immersively outside, and it is very immersive if you think about it just for a moment. You can hear something happening at the country club just down the way, so we have that going on. The cicadas are singing. We have a clear blue night over here and a thunderstorm over there. And so when you think of what it is to really sit in the center of the chaos that is our existence, we are immersed in it right now. And at the same time, our tradition teaches that this Shabbat of Selichot, as it ends and we move into the week leading up to the High Holy Days, a new door opens for us if we choose to turn its handle. A new opportunity to perceive, to awaken, sits in front of us, beckoning for us to hear its call. So as we observe Selichot this year, 5781, on the dawning of a new year, 5782, we have invited a few different congregants to offer their own reflections of moments of their own personal awakening over this last year, 18 months or so. Perhaps during this time you have felt awake at some points, but more likely you may have felt asleep, walking through a fog where every day seemed like the same day, again and again. And in many ways, that's not really different from how we live our lives most of the time. But this time has also given us the opportunity to see things a little differently, to shift our perspective. And so we turn together as community to be inspired by each other, by each other's stories, by each other's voices. To get into that spirit of this idea of awakening, of choosing to see things differently, we would invite your attention to turn to the poem that is titled "The Summer Day" by Mary Oliver. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? We move into a new day as we begin the blessings of Havdalah. As we move into story, it will alternate with blessing, and we invite you to immerse yourself in all of the senses of listening, of really taking in. And so we turn to our first three stories. We'll hear first from Rigler, and then we'll hear a piece written by Carly Eisen. She's not able to be here tonight, so Neil will read that. And then our third piece will come from Elizabeth Levin. So Neil, as you make your way up, just a brief word. Neil really led this exercise with our storytellers of learning how to dig deep and awaken in our own experiences, in our own understandings of our lives. And so he is not only a storyteller this night, but also and always a teacher for us.
You can hear the music much better here. I always thought I had a good sense of time, not only of my own time, but in this case, the ways in which time structured the lives of my students. For years, as a high school school teacher and youth group advisor, I had a sense of how much students tried to fit into a day. From hours at school to hours of homework to hours of club or team practices or lessons or rehearsals or meetings to family demands, shifts at a job, meals, naps, driving time in between all that, and, dare I say, social and personal time. They juggled, and I knew it. And I knew when to engage, when to offer something new, or when to back off. I had a good sense of them as beings in time, I thought. What I didn't fully know, until being forced to suddenly encounter them only in Zoom windows, was that there was another whole dimension I missed. Space. Suddenly, I knew my students not as people in my classroom, but as beings in their own spaces. I had students jockeying for space at a kitchen table, being interrupted by parents and pets, sitting in their own bedrooms. I got to know the artwork on their walls, the chairs they sat in, how light or dark their workspace is. I saw students literally still in bed for their first period class, relaxing on couches after lunch, or sitting outside when the weather permitted. Getting to know them as beings of time and space deepened my appreciation even further for them as whole people, the challenges they faced, the comforts they had, the limits to their freedom, the tone and color and texture and atmosphere of the worlds in which they existed. It helped to remind me to be sure to think of everyone in this way, that there are worlds outside of meetings and classes, that these worlds impact us all differently, and that I need to be aware of both time and space. This is Carly's story. Carly and Jonathan were looking forward to their fall Sunday afternoon wedding, to be with loved ones, nosh on lox and bagels, and groove to live music. Then COVID-19 hit. Uncertain how the pandemic would unfold, they made the very tough decision to pause their planning. However, during the pause, Carly unexpectedly and incessantly thought about the Jewish weddings that continued to take place during the Holocaust, when the community chose joy despite sadness and uncertainty. Of course, to Carly, the Shoah and this pandemic are incomparable moments in time. However, the incredible individuals who chose to celebrate life while living through horrid circumstances were her inspiration. Carly and her now husband Jonathan made the choice to celebrate life while keeping everyone's health and safety top priority. They became NSCI's first ever virtual Ufruf, limited their 150-person guest list to a 13-person one, provided face masks, shared a professionally filmed live stream for their friends and family who couldn't be there physically, danced to their favorite tunes thanks to a vinyl spinning DJ, and noshed on lox and bagels on a special fall Sunday afternoon.
Elizabeth, where did you move? Yeah. At the height of the pandemic last winter, when everything was shut down, my son Eli began studying for his bar mitzvah. Much discussion arose as to what the day was going to look like. We were fairly certain that there was not going to be a large party, but for our family and for Eli, that had never been what this was going to be about. So for us, that was okay. He had selected a date so he could read the same Torah portion as his dad, and for him, that was what was important. As the day grew closer and closer, I was really struggling with the idea that there was not going to be a room full of people at the service. See, I had a visual of what this day was going to look like. My husband Eric and I began discussing our children's hypothetical b'nai mitzvot even before they were born. This milestone meant that much to us. In those days, it included a room full of all the people important to our family gathered in person in a beautiful sanctuary to hear them read from the Torah. I was really struggling with the notion of not being able to see the faces of our loved ones as Eli became a bar mitzvah. Even though I intellectually understood that having a room full of people was impossible, I was emotionally frustrated with the notion that it could not be. I wondered round the clock whether the day would feel like enough. The morning that he was to become a bar mitzvah, all of that worry went away. I don't know exactly how it is possible, but even though there were only 30 people physically in the space with us, it was as if the whole room was full. You see, there was an energy in the room. It was almost electric. And because it was not physically full of people, there were fewer distractions, and there was more space to be present in the moment and to focus on what mattered. Our extended family and friends were able to be with us, albeit somewhere out in cyberspace, but we could still feel their presence. Coincidentally, that day also happened to be my grandmother's yahrzeit. She was close with Eli, and while she lived well into her 90s, before she died, she often reflected on the idea that she probably wouldn't live long enough to see him become a bar mitzvah. But on that day, she too was able to be with us symbolically. Her spiritual presence was felt in the way that we could feel the love of our family and friends who were streaming in virtually. I cannot really explain how, but on that day, the room was filled to the brim. I worried for weeks on end that it wouldn't feel like enough, but it was quite the opposite. It was more than enough. It was perfect. So we turn now to our second blessing for Havdalah. We do hope you will sing with us. We are outside, and hopefully everyone feels comfortable and got a lot of la, la, la in it. So everyone do join us. If you are sitting at a table, you actually have some spices in bags there. So if you'd like to take them up and take in the scent of the end of Shabbat, please do so.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei v'samim borei minei v'samim la 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 la
Our next two stories, first we'll hear from Merens, and then we'll hear from Cheryl Solomon.
Good evening, everyone. Shavua Tov. This past year, I have felt a loss of self. It felt like I had abandoned, or rather had been abandoned by the most fundamental components of my being. As a poet, I stopped writing. As an athlete, I struggled with my relationship to my body. As someone in recovery, I did not work my program with the rigor it requires. I couldn't find God anywhere. I simply existed. And for me, my existence was in and of itself meaningless. My beingness was never enough. This past year, I also began my career as a teacher. The following are the very first words I said to my very first class. Hi everyone, I'm Mix Merens. I use they, them pronouns, pero en español prefiero él o ella, he or they, and it is so wonderful to be with you. One of the most prolific teachers of my time, Bell Hooks, says this about a classroom community. As a classroom community, our capacity to generate excitement is deeply affected by our interest in one another, in hearing one another's voices, in recognizing one another's presence. Students deserve to be seen, honored, and witnessed each and every day by their teachers. But what struck me in my first year of teaching is the ways in which students reciprocate that notion. On the very last Thursday of September 2020, after having endured an exhaustion of a relentless outbound commute, I rested on our basket-weaved beige couch, worn with nostalgia. Upon mindlessly opening my phone, I was notified that a student had emailed. I recall a glare upon my screen as the luminescence of summer's final vestiges shone through the living room window. I would like to share a small excerpt of this email. I just wanted to thank you. You being so proud of who you are and encouraging all of us, you gave me the courage to come out to my mother as non-binary. In mourning a loss of self throughout this year, I found it hard to breathe. I was experiencing a sort of spiritual asphyxiation. My soul was hypoxic, and yet, in this moment, I cherished each and every word of this email, each keystroke. I felt constriction relent. I could take a deep breath. Throughout the year, I continued to have the honor of witnessing their journey. They were vulnerable in class discussions about identity. They corrected classmates who misgendered one another, and even myself. They were, and that was more than enough for me. My existence, my being, was enough for this student. In being, I was, in fact, doing. In honoring the soul that God gave me, there was nothing more to do than to be. In the words of Rabbi Allen-Lu, we have nothing to offer but each other and our broken hearts, and that will be enough. Thank you.
Cheryl.
A few months into the pandemic, I started to feel like I was in the movie Groundhog Day. Every day seemed the same. My life felt so small it could fit on the head of a pin. Like a lot of people, I was upset because I didn't feel like I was using my days, and I knew they were ticking by whether I used them or not. I was not going to get a credit at the end. During this slow stretch, my son and daughter-in-law, who live in Boston, were expecting my first grandchild. Although I was wildly excited, I only saw my daughter-in-law's growing belly in pictures. Their friends threw them a baby shower, which I attended on Zoom. On September 24th, 2020, the day our granddaughter, Ari Rose Solomon, was born, my husband and I got in our car with Lysol spray and wipes, N95 masks and face shields, and we drove and we drove and we drove to Boston. When I first held Ari, I felt deep and immediate love for her. But there was a long line of family waiting to meet her, and there wasn't enough time for us to get to know each other. I went home thinking we'd be back soon, but the pandemic prevented us from traveling all winter, and it wasn't until just before Passover of 2021 that I got to see her again. Now she was 6 months old, and she smiled when I sang Joni Mitchell. Her favorite game was pulling my hair, or my earrings, or the glasses off my face. Although she was completely unfazed by the piercing blast of the smoke alarm, true torture was putting her head through the opening at the top of a shirt. One afternoon while she was napping, I was making matzo ball soup for the first Seder. I saw on the baby monitor that she was awake, and my son went to get her because I was elbow deep in matzo meal. He brought her into the kitchen so she could see us cooking. She gave me one of her glorious smiles, and when I looked at her, it struck me for the first time that now I was a Jewish grandmother making the matzo ball soup for the holiday. I always thought my own grandma was so old, like a grandma. But she was just 51 when I was born, 10 years younger than I was. It didn't matter that I was wearing yoga pants and flip-flops instead of a house dress and an apron. At that moment in the kitchen, time, which for so long had been standing still, gently pushed me forward.
We turn now to the lighting and blessing of the Havdalah candle. As we move forward into our last set of stories, we'll hear from Dan Razowsky, Sam Evins, and Xuan-Vu Nguyen. Everyone's fine. You're good.
Talking to my twin 4-month boys, Eli and Ezra, could have been one of the most freeing conversations I've had in a really long time. I would smile to them, and they would be looking at me, smiling right back. Eli is our more talkative one, so I had very intense conversations with him. My wife, Tova, said I'm the Tony Robbins for infants. I would talk positively with him, and his brother, Ezra, would listen carefully. Ezra would chime in with a little hoot noise, and I would edge him on, agreeing with what he was thinking. Then Eli would go off with his cooing noises and somehow putting together the word okay in his vocabulary. I'd tell Eli how he's the cutest kid in the world. He would agree and smile brightly at me. Then I would look at Ezra and say, "You are an angel." He'd stare blankly at me until my bright smile would get him to smile and recognize I just called him an angel. I asked him, "How many times did you go poopy today?" And smile at Eli, and he'd still smile back at me. I would say, "Did you go poopy 1 time, 2 times, 3 times?" And Eli would say, "Okay," perfect timing, as if he responded to my 3 times of pooping question. After 15 minutes talking to my boys, I went to the bathroom and thinking to myself how freely of a conversation that was with them. I could say what was on my mind without any judgment on their or nor mine. I had a moment of what it felt like with my ego being out the door. I took note of what I did with the boys to have that feeling and reflected with the engagement that I had with them was sincere. I looked at them straight in the eye, comfortably, asking them questions and listening to their cooing noises. It was this moment of clarity that if only I could do the same with other human beings. Maybe not ask other people how many times they've gone poopy today, but to genuinely listen to one and engage 100% of my energy towards them, connecting with each and every one regardless of whether they are my twin boys or some friend or stranger. At the end of the day, to look at them, the same image of God within them as in my boys. Talk to everyone with love and respect, with no judgment. Thank you.
Sam.
Let's see if I can see. Last year, I was blessed with the birth of my first great-grandchild, Emma, who entered planet Earth on March 31st, 2020, amidst the thickness, depth, and despair of the great COVID-19 pandemic. I knew she was going to arrive, and I knew I would be overwhelmed with immense, intense joy and happiness. And when first I saw her, I knew for certain those feelings were true. But what I did not know, and what I could not anticipate, were my thoughts and feelings long slumbering, that were reawakened in my heart and my mind of events taking place shortly before and after I was born 85 years ago. I recall often thinking that unlike many of my friends, I never saw, loved, or was held by any of my grandparents. And my grandparents never had a chance to see love or hold me. The possibility of that pipe dream, that fantasy, ended when my mother's family went up in smoke in the ashes and ovens of Auschwitz. And God only knows what happened to my father's family in the Ukraine. Emma's birth awakened in me a new perspective, far, far greater than my own personal joy. Her birth, I realized, symbolized for me a victory over the attempted and total annihilation of Jews and an ongoing symbol of the survival, rebirth, and reaffirmation of hope, continuation, continuity, and love. And for that thought, I am truly grateful and thankful to God.
That was beautiful, Sam. You got to show that to Emma. Yeah, that's our parents in the meantime.
Xuan-Vu.
Good evening. So just as I thought we could see the light at the end of the tunnel, another one looms in sight. From where I stand, this one looks just as dark, maybe even worse. Last week, between my more than the usual number of bouts of internal unraveling, I managed to dredge up whatever was left in my barrel of creativity in order to make dinner. Here we go again, another darn meal to cook. I reached into the fridge and found some mismatched items to make a salad. I watched and chopped, robot-like. I tore open a bag of Trader Joe's multicolored radishes. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Yes? Okay. I took them to the sink and scrubbed them, plopped them on the cutting board, and gave out a sigh before cutting them into thin slices. I knew that at this point I had to pay attention so I don't cut myself. Even so, I don't remember how many radishes I'd gone through before I picked up a deep purple one. And just as I was getting to the middle of this purple radish, the fattest part, I saw the most beautiful thing in front of me. And you may be thinking she needs to get out more. That's true too. Nonetheless, that doesn't deter or diminish the beauty of what I saw. And when I saw this thing in front of me, I literally woke up. It was like my soul had rejoined my body at that moment. I was seeing in color again. Transfixed by this beauty, I picked up the slice of radish that I had just cut and held it to the light of the setting sun. Before me was a quarter-size, small, white crystalline circle, transparent. In the middle was a small purple circle from which opaque white lines radiated in a starburst pattern and ended at a thin line of vibrant magenta that encircled the whole thing. It was nature's perfection. The thing is, I wasn't even aware that I had been sleepwalking before my encounter with the radish. I am aware that I'm grumpy sometimes, yes. Okay, more than sometimes, if you ask my kids. I'm aware of the many times I've tried to hold it together this past year. Yes, I am aware of that. But sleepwalking? No, not me. I've been meditating. So ego aside, what I do know is this. In those few moments with the radish, I found myself in this magical place of simultaneously recovering and discovering at the same time. Somehow this little slice of beauty had unsuspectingly pulled me out of my desensitized, fatigued state so that I could find a new wonder with which to refresh my heart and my spirit. It was just what I needed to rebound. The past 18 months have uncovered many things in our world that need work. What I know for sure is that if I am to have the edge and the strength needed to continue fighting injustices, and the tenderness necessary to continue caring for my family, for humanity, my community, and my earth for the long haul, encounters with a little purple radish slice of the world are a must. Sure, anger, indignation, and heartbreak have their importance in fueling us to fight against injustice. But just as important are joy and wonder because they refuel us. As we enter the new year, I truly hope that you will make time to immerse yourself in everyday life moments that tickle your fancy, even in these trying times. And I would venture to say, especially in these trying times, because although They may be small and easily dismissed as frivolous. It's during these magical little moments of wonder and joy that we allow ourselves to continually recover and discover, and thus allowing ourselves to heal and to regenerate. Now more than ever, we need everyone on board to care for one another and to stand up for those who are defenseless. And that I am constantly reminded of by the younger generation. The defenseless also includes our earth. Shana Tova. Thank you. Oh, don't forget your fruits and veggies.
That awakening and celebrating and cherishing the little everyday things, isn't that ultimately why we have Havdalah, to move from the extraordinary back into the ordinary, never forgetting that we carry the extraordinary with us all the time. So we turn to the final blessing of Havdalah. Join us.
המבדיל בין קודש
Program. Near the Wall of a House by Yehuda Amichai. Near the wall of a house painted to look like stone, I saw visions of God. A sleepless night that gives others a headache gave me flowers, opening beautifully inside my brain. And he who was lost like a dog will be found like a human being and brought back home again. Love is not the last room. There are others after it, the whole length of the corridor that has no end. We return and renew as in days of old. We'll invite you to rise. Let's join together in Avinu Malkeinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Honeinu Raneinu, Yimanu Masi, Seimanu, Tzedakah Seimanu, tzedakah v'chesed lehoshkienu.
In just a moment, we'll turn to Hashivenu and then close our evening with the sound of the shofar, our soul's alarm clock, our soul's call to awakening. We are grateful to all of our storytellers this night for their sharing of their own awakenings and inspiring us to awaken with them, perhaps in ways that we understand through them and perhaps in our own ways. We pray together that it might be a season of great awakening for us all.
Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai Elecha,
Shavua Tov. We thank you for being here. You're welcome if you're here to stay and greet each other, however you would like. The terrace is available. Apparently there's music available, too, just down the way. So I don't know that the shofar and the country club band have ever merged in harmony so beautifully, but so it goes. Yeah, it's actually perfect. We want to, while we are here, everyone wish Asher Rigler a Nisiat Tova. He departs for a program in Israel for, is it 6 months, Asher? 4 months, leaving tomorrow. So what a great way to begin your new year, Asher, Nisiat Tova. And if you are here and you are not a storyteller, we would invite you to share your words of reflection and gratitude with the storytellers as well. They were, many of them were unsure in this process and willing just sort of to go with it to honor the invitation, but hopefully you feel, as we do, that their stories were incredibly moving and inspiring on so many different levels. So to each and all of you, and especially to Neil Rigler, as always, thank you. Shavua Tov, everyone.